Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. So today we are going to talk about when you step into a new leadership role, whether it's with a new team or a new company, or it's your first time being in that role, how to best go about the first 30 to 45 days so that you can have not only a better onboarding experience, but you can also make your mark on the team sooner than later. Now, what prompted me to make this video or even think about this particular concept was that like when I started my career path 15, 20 years back, I realized that there was an implied assumption that people will take 6 months, if not more, to get settled in. And there was a lot of tolerance and patience amongst the stakeholders, amongst the clients, amongst the team that this person is still new. Let's give them some time before they can get settled in. Now, unfortunately, because of the fast-paced environment we are in, the first 30 to 45 days are truly where you do need to start creating an impression, and your team and stakeholders will definitely expect something out of you within those 30 to 45 days. Anything beyond that, yeah, I mean, it does warrant certain questions that are you onboarding correctly, or is that the best way you can go about starting off with a new team? So, again, just based on my experience, and again, your experience might be totally different, but I do feel that most of the new leaders end up spending a lot of their time in either of the two extremes. So the first one being that they might go very heavy on the technical side, that, okay, it's my first day, show me every single design document, show me every single architecture document, let me go through all of the code line by line. And that's their way of trying to develop the technical expertise because they assume that they are supposed to be the most the expert in the room when it comes to the product or the platform. And then the second kind of leaders will err on the other extreme, which is, let's focus a lot on people. I mean, let's try to have a lot more one-on-one conversations. Let's try to get to know every single individual and what have they experienced. Again, fundamentally, both of these things are very important. They all have to be done. The question is that do you really need to spend a lot of time in doing either of these two things in your first month, or is there a better approach? So the way I at least envision all of this, that if you take a step back, right, when you start as a leader, always remember that you are not accountable for a product alone, right? Or you are not accountable just for how the team operates. What you are really accountable for is this entire ecosystem, which I've, tried to illustrate here. Which means that let's start with the innermost, block here, that it could be a product or a platform or a service which your team is operating. With that, there is a book of work, obviously, which is your roadmap, and it might consist of all the incoming requests, backlog, tech debt, risk items. There might be a number of categories there, and then the team itself. I mean, they have their own way of working, so that's what I call as functions. It could be like whether they follow agile, whether they follow waterfall. I mean, I hope not, but so you get the point that there are certain operating functions which constitutes how the team actually goes about day-to-day functions. And then you have your users and stakeholders who are providing inputs and they are expecting a certain output from this group. And then based on that, they create an impression or an experience. So again, as a new leader, you are accountable for this entire block. Now, once you realize this, what I'm suggesting is that instead of doing this bottoms up, try to do a top down approach, which means that instead of zooming in into any of these, maybe take a step back and start asking certain high level questions just to understand how this entire block works. And then, as and when you get familiar, you can continue taking a deeper dive, right? So, what I've done here is I've compiled an onboarding checklist, and I've tried keeping it very generic and domain and any of the product agnostic, which means regardless of which team you are handling, for the most part, this checklist should still apply. So, my recommendation to any new leader would be that start by understanding what is the team structure and overview. And again, I've listed certain prompts. Um, Depending on the situation, you may come up with your own. But the idea here is that start off by understanding that, okay, why does this team exist, right? What's the goal of this team? And then the next thing you can do is that have a conversation with your senior leaders that, okay, what exactly is the expectation out of this group or this portfolio in next 1 year or so, right? So this will give you a head start, and I'll give you a very practical example as to how this is important. So let's say if your team is really heavily invested into coming up with the next best thing and trying to expedite the releases or trying to put code out in production as soon as possible. But your senior leadership is actually more worried about risk and compliance issue. So now once you have that conversation, you can actually immediately understand that, okay, wait a minute, my team is busy trying to make things go faster and quicker and more, modern. But at the same time, my business actually expects us to do a lot more on the security side of things or on the risk and compliance side of the things. So this will actually get you that sort of like framework, which you can use to then evaluate if your team is even handling the right items at the right time to begin with. So that's the reason why I would highly recommend that spend first couple of days in just having those very open conversations with all the senior leadership, just to make sure that you have a decent understanding of what is the desired outcome or what would success look like in your role. And then definitely take a deeper dive into org chart, who is doing what exactly does the team own. Again, I mean, I have had countless occasions where a leader actually has no idea all the aspects of the software or the particular platform and service their team is accountable for. And that really creates a very bad impression that, okay, well, your team is responsible for it. And as a leader, you are supposed to know that. So really dig deeper into that estate ownership and have those conversations with your users and stakeholders, because again, many a times your team members might not even be aware that they're accountable for certain things, but your users and stakeholders might think differently. So that's the importance of taking a deeper dive into a little bit of the team structure and overview in the first 1 or 2 days. The next one I would recommend is just doing a quick current state analysis, and the idea is to stay at a high level, right? So start off by just reviewing the RACI chart, or at least asking the questions that, okay, we have 5 people in the team. What is everyone responsible for, right? Again, taking an example of software development, are all 5 people doing the development? Do any of these people are accountable for QA? Just basic questions like that. That what is the exact role of any and all team members within the team? And then definitely ask your team to produce a roadmap. Um, Again, like your team might come back with 100, 120, 200 items, and that's where you may have to coach the team that I understand, but can you break it down into what is the items in flight, what is the tech debt, what is the backlog item, what are some of the modernization effort, and so on. If possible, try to get a sense of headcounts and the talent management if it exists. I mean, so let's say if you do have managers or directors reporting up to you, at least from their perspective, how would they rate their talent? I always recommend a simple ABC matrix to start, just to make sure that you can get a sense of how many A players we are talking about and so on, right? So this will give you sort of that head start in having those conversations in case there is an HR conversation which needs to happen. And then finally, again, budget. You don't have to necessarily know every single detail, but at least at a high level, what's our total operating budget? How much is the spend on the salary? How much is the spend on license and maintenance, and so on. And then finally, the operations and workflow. So this would be the third part of it. That again, taking a step back, regardless of who is asking what are the different intake channels, right? So how is the new work even brought into the team? Are people dropping emails? Is there a ticketing queue? Are people opening up, Jira tickets, or are they filling out a form to request a particular project? Without questioning any of that, just try to get a sense as to what are the different incoming channels. And again, you will probably observe a lot of inefficiencies in that process as well. And then try to get a sense of what are the different policies and procedures which the team is supposed to participate in. So, if your organization has well-defined ITSM processes, so are there incident processes, change management? Do you have any kind of risk and compliance review going on? So just try to get a basic sense of what are the different operation processes and which one is working and which one is not. And then finally, try to talk to your team about KPIs and branding. Are there any particular KPIs which they are tracking? Is there a particular matrix which is exposed to the external stakeholders? So by doing all of this in the first 2 weeks, it will give you a head start, or at least it will give you a decent idea as to how that overall block is structured and how it is working. Now, one of the questions I usually get is that, okay, well, what if my team doesn't have answers to all of these? And that's okay. I mean, that actually, if anything, it gives you an action item that if your team is not able to articulate what are the different headcount needs, if your team does not have a well-defined roadmap, or if they cannot tell you that, hey, we actually don't have any KPIs, and that's fine. I mean, now you know that that's something which you need to focus on as a new leader. So that's the importance of this onboarding checklist. Again, in my experience, this is very much a firm agnostic. There is no tie-ups to any of the technical aspects. You can probably replace some of these elements, but for the most part, if a leader starts off with this, they can do a significantly better job in the first 2 weeks or so in trying to get sense of how things are. This one, we're not going to go into the detail, but this is something which is available for free on our website. Once you do develop a decent understanding of how the overall organization is set up and what are some of the fundamentals there, if you then decide to take a deeper dive into product and platform, again, as a leader, unless you are directly responsible or you're contributing in a hands-on capacity, I don't think it's a great idea to take a deeper dive into every single design aspect or review every single line of code which has been written. Probably not a good utilization of the time unless that's a part of your job. So what I would recommend is that as a leader, at least paying attention and making sure that you can answer these questions or your team can articulate to you. That's what I've tried to compile here. That it's essentially you take any product and you ask these questions. That should give you a 360 view, and you should be able to participate in different stakeholder conversations even without knowing the full technical details. So, just to pick out some examples here, that if it's a software product or it's a SaaS application, just asking that, hey, by the way, do we have any monitors and alerts configured? If so, what exactly is being monitored and who gets alerts and who acts on them? So this will probably give you a decent idea of where you are in terms of telemetry. Similarly, like how many vendors are involved? Do we have a some kind of a business review going with them? And then who manages the patching and security? Now, I can almost guarantee you, for the most part, a lot of the team members will probably not have good responses for each one of these because, again, that's the whole reason why you are there in the leadership role to begin with, so that you can identify the gaps and you can coach the team to get going in and filling those. So, in my experience, if any leader takes this checklist, they will probably discover the gaps on their own very quickly before a stakeholder walks up to you that, hey, by the way, yesterday a certain module of the application went offline in the middle of the night and apparently no one knew about it till next morning the clients started complaining. That's not a good place to be in as a leader of the team. So once you start asking these 360-degree questions, your team will, in one way or another, will give you a hint whether they have coverage in certain aspect or not. And you can be transparent with your leaders that based on my first month, which I've spent with the team, these are some of the areas where we have decent coverage, but these are some of the gaps which I've identified. So this is how you build up your own reputation and your own brand as a leader, that within the first couple of weeks, you were able to have these conversations going and you have a gap list now which your team can work against. So hopefully this was useful. Again, both the checklists are fully available on our website. You can subscribe for the few newsletter. We do have an offering specialized towards the new leaders. So if any of you need any additional help, you can always request your free consultation. We'd be more than happy to study what your ecosystem is, what kind of team you are entering, what kind of domain it is, and we can always customize this checklist per your need as well. So yeah, I mean, so hopefully this was useful. Again, would love your feedback, would love to see some of you subscribe, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.